There are mornings when you wake, and it feels as if an invisible weight is already pressing against your chest. You open your eyes, and though the room is quiet, though the world outside may be just beginning to stir with birdsong and dawn within you, it is as if an entire storm is waiting. It is not the sound of rain or the violence of thunder, but something heavier, more suffocating, an unspoken burden, a silent weight. We carry it everywhere, not in the hands, not upon the shoulders, but somewhere deeper, like a ring of old keys hanging from the heart, rusted heavy, clanging softly with every movement. Each key belongs to a door we once opened, a moment of regret, a memory of loss, a promise we couldn't keep, a face we can't forget. Instead of unlocking freedom, the keys bind us a metallic chorus, reminding us of what we refuse to release. I remember once standing at the edge of a deserted train station. The tracks stretched into the horizon, silent steel veins cutting through fields gone yellow in the late summer sun. The station itself was empty, but scattered across the platform were dozens of abandoned suitcases, some torn, some weathered, some locked shut, as though guarding treasures that no one would return for. And I thought to myself, this is how many of us live. Carrying baggage no one asks us to carry, unable to place it down, unable to continue walking. We forget that not all luggage is meant to be carried forever. Some were only ever meant to travel with us for a season, then left behind so we could walk lighter. Yet here we are, dragging them across years, across decades, convincing ourselves that without them, we will lose some part of our identity. That without the ache, we wouldn't know who we are. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you asked yourself what these keys, these suitcases, these invisible burdens are costing you? The Buddha once spoke of arrows. The first arrow is the pain life throws at us: loss, illness, betrayal, disappointment. That is unavoidable. It pierces everyone at some point. But the second arrow, the more cruel one, is the one we shoot into ourselves over and over. Each time we replay the memory, each time we refuse to forgive, each time we cling to the wound as though it defines us. And isn't that what the rusted keys are? Isn't that what the abandoned luggage is? The second arrow, the wound we keep feeding, the echo we keep rehearsing until it feels eternal. But nothing is eternal. Not storms, not shadows, not even sorrow. Imagine for a moment a cocoon hanging quietly from the branch of a tree. To the outside eye, it looks lifeless, even tragic. A shell sealed shut, brittle, forgotten. But within it, the impossible is being written: transformation. The creature inside cannot stay forever in the comfort of the cocoon. At some point, the walls must split, the darkness must be surrendered, and from the brokenness emerges wings. Too many of us live our lives gripping the cocoon, afraid of what lies beyond, afraid of the tearing, the breaking, the surrender. We believe that to hold on to the cocoon is to preserve safety. But the truth is, safety without growth is a quiet kind of death. Only by allowing the shell to crack, only by stepping into uncertainty, can the wings of freedom ever open. And maybe that is what letting go truly means. Not abandoning who we are, but daring to become more than what we have been. The desert teaches the same lesson. Walk far enough into its silence, and you will see how fragile footprints really are. One gust of wind, one sweep of shifting sand, and even the heaviest impressions vanish. What was once a clear mark of your presence is erased, returned to the endless dunes. Isn't it strange we mourn the idea of being forgotten, of memories fading? Yet in truth, life is like the desert. It was never meant to keep every footprint. If it did, the sand would be too heavy to move the wind, too burdened to breathe. The desert remains vast because it knows how to let go. Perhaps our hearts must learn to be deserts too, holding gently for a while, but releasing before the weight becomes unbearable. I once spoke to an old man who had lived through wars, famine, and the collapse of empires. His eyes carried the haze of decades, and his voice trembled like an old violin string. When I asked him how he survived so much grief, he said, "I stopped counting losses as tombstones. I began counting them as stars." At first, I did not understand, but he explained each sorrow, each loss, each heartbreak was not something he carried as a wound. It became a star in his night sky. It shone with memory, yes, but also with guidance. Instead of darkening his world, they illuminated his path. And when the dawn came, he did not weep that the stars had vanished. He smiled knowing they were always there even when unseen. That is the secret of release. You do not erase, you do not deny, you do not destroy, you transform. The wound becomes a star, the crack becomes a lantern, the cocoon becomes wings. But why then do we resist? Why do we clutch the rusted keys, drag the broken suitcases, protect the cocoon long past its season? Because somewhere deep within, we confuse letting go with betrayal. We think that to release is to dishonor, to stop mourning is to stop loving. To put down the past is to abandon those who once filled it. But the truth is, the opposite to carry endlessly is to betray the present. To drag the shadow into every sunrise is to refuse the gift of this day. To let go is not betrayal. It is the highest act of love for yourself, for the one you lost, for the life that still waits. Close your eyes. Breathe. Picture the weight you've been carrying not as a stone, not as a wound, but as that ring of rusted keys. Hear their clanging. Feel their heaviness. Now imagine one by one you place them down upon the earth. The keys do not vanish. They remain there, silent part of the soil. But they no longer cut into your chest. They no longer hold you back from walking forward. Do you feel it? The absence of weight is not emptiness, it is possibility. It is the space for wings. This is only the beginning. The journey of release is not a single step, not a single sunrise. It is a path. It is a film unfolding one frame after another. But every story must open with the courage to set something down. And if you can do that, if you can place the first key upon the earth, then already the rest of the path is waiting, lit by the stars of everything you've survived. There are moments when the past doesn't knock at the door politely. It storms in uninvited. It arrives as a whisper in the middle of the night, as the echo of a voice you once trusted, as the faint trace of a fragrance that drifts by in the street. Suddenly, you are no longer where you are. You are dragged backward into a room of memories that has no windows, no fresh air. But here is the truth. The room is not locked. The walls are not real. They are graffiti painted over and over by your own hand. Memories scrawled like layers of spray paint on old brick, some bright, some dark, some incomprehensible. At first, each mark had meaning. Each was a story. But after years of painting over the same wall, the images blur, colors bleed, words lose clarity. And yet, you stand there staring at the wall, convinced that it is the only reality. How many of us are trapped not by events themselves, but by the way we keep painting them again and again in our minds? Letting go does not mean demolishing the wall. It means picking up a fresh brush and painting something new. The bricks beneath will always exist, but they don't need to define the canvas forever. The Buddha once said, "The mind is like a monkey swinging from branch to branch." Memory is one such branch, but the monkey rarely rests there. It shakes it violently again and again. Each shake stirs dust. Each swing distorts perspective. That is why we grow weary. Not because of what happened, but because of how tirelessly we repeat it. Consider this: a scar is not a wound. A scar is proof of healing. The cut has closed, the skin has knit itself back together. But when you run your fingers over the scar and press into it, as though testing its pain, you reopen what was meant to remain closed. Memory works in the same way. Left untouched, it becomes part of the body's story, something integrated, something harmless. But pressed too often, it becomes an injury again. Transformation begins when you stop pressing, when you allow the scar to simply exist without needing it to hurt. I recall meeting a craftsman who restored old instruments. He took a broken violin, its body cracked and strings frayed, and instead of discarding it, he began weaving gold dust into the fracture. When I asked why, he said, "The crack is part of the music. Without it, the sound would not be the same. I don't erase it. I give it new dignity." Isn't that what we must do with memory? Not erase, not discard, but honor the cracks with gold, wisdom, compassion, forgiveness, to transform the brokenness into beauty, to allow the fracture to shine instead of rot. This is the essence of spiritual alchemy. Pain turned into light burden, turned into guidance wounds, turned into wisdom. Yet transformation requires courage. We fear that if we let go of pain, we will also let go of meaning. That if we release the memory, we will lose the person, the love, the proof that it mattered. But clinging to pain does not preserve love. It only corrodes it. Like water locked in a vessel for too long, the sweetness turns bitter. True love is preserved not by holding tight, but by allowing it to breathe. When you open your hand, the fragrance lingers even when the flower is gone. Let me tell you a story. There was once a man who carried an old, cracked mirror wherever he went. He told himself that it reminded him of his youth, of the person he once was. But the mirror was heavy, its edges sharp, and every time he opened it, it cut his fingers. Still, he refused to put it down. One day, he met a traveler who asked, "Why do you cling to a mirror that wounds you?" The man replied, "Because without it, I won't know who I am." The traveler laughed gently, "But a mirror does not hold your face. It only reflects it. You are still here, with or without it." The man stood stunned. For the first time, he realized the mirror was not preserving his identity. It was distorting it. That day, he left the mirror on the roadside. And as he walked forward, his reflection appeared again, not in shards of glass, but in rivers and windows, in the eyes of strangers who smiled at him. This is what happens when you put the past down. You discover that you yourself were never lost, only hidden behind broken glass. The desert gives us another lesson. Walk through dunes at sunset, and you will see how the wind reshapes the world in moments. Hills rise, valleys vanish, ridges bend into new patterns. If you return tomorrow, it will look entirely different. The desert does not mourn what was swept away. It celebrates the dance of change. Why then do we mourn so fiercely when life rearranges us? Why do we insist on clinging to yesterday's shape when today's wind is sculpting something new? The truth is, every gust of life is an artist. You can either curse the wind for destroying your castle of sand, or you can marvel at the new design it leaves behind. Think also of stars. At night, they burn like eternal guardians. Yet by morning, they vanish. Do we grieve the stars when dawn comes? No. We accept that their time has passed for now, and we look to the light of the sun. And when the night returns, the stars return too in their own rhythm, in their own season. Memory is like starlight. It does not need to blaze at every hour. It has its time. When it fades, it is not gone. It simply makes room for another kind of light. So what does it mean to transform? It means to shift your relationship with what was, to stop painting the same graffiti on the same wall, to stop swinging on the same branch until your arms ache, to stop pressing the scar until it bleeds. Transformation does not mean amnesia. It means integration. It means taking the rusted key and melting it into a new form, a bell perhaps that rings with clarity instead of weight. It means letting the cocoon split, not to destroy it, but to give way to flight. When you begin this work, it feels like betrayal. Your mind whispers, "If I stop hurting, I will forget. If I stop remembering, I will dishonor." But understand this pain is not the only way to remember. You can remember with tenderness. You can remember with gratitude. You can remember with love. The person you lost, the season that ended, the dream that dissolved, none of these are honored by your suffering. They are honored by the way you live beyond them, by the way you allow them to become stars, not shackles. So pause now. Breathe deeply. Ask yourself, am I carrying a mirror that cuts me? Am I guarding graffiti that hides the wall? Am I pressing scars that long to rest? If the answer is yes, then know this, you are not alone. Every human heart wrestles with the same fear. But also know this, the moment you put down even one piece of that weight, you do not collapse, you rise. Transformation does not happen in thunderclaps. It begins quietly, like the first stirring of wind in the desert, like the faintest shimmer of dawn on the horizon. And from there, everything begins to change. Forgiveness is a word that many fear. To some, it sounds like surrender, like weakness, like permitting injustice. To others, it feels impossible, as though forgiving is the same as erasing what was done. But forgiveness is neither erasure nor surrender. Forgiveness is release. It is the act of unclenching a fist that has long grown stiff from gripping shards of broken glass. When you refuse to forgive, you carry the shards everywhere. Each step, each gesture draws blood again. But when you open your hand, when you let the shards fall, you do not say, "This never happened." You say, "This wound will not be my master anymore." Think of a wall covered in graffiti, layers upon layers of words, sprayed in anger, in grief, in defiance. If you stare long enough, all you see is chaos. But the wall is still a wall, and the bricks are still steady beneath the paint. When you decide to forgive, it is like painting over that wall, not to deny what was written there, but to create space for something new. The old words will always be part of the history, but they no longer dictate the view. Forgiveness is not about saying you were right. It is about saying, "This will no longer control me." I once heard a story of a woman who carried a letter in her pocket for 20 years. It was a letter of betrayal, of abandonment, of words that tore her life apart. She folded it carefully, kept it close as though to remind herself of the injustice she had suffered. But over time, the paper grew thin, the ink smudged, the words blurred. And one day, standing at the edge of the sea, she unfolded the fragile sheet, read it one last time, and let the wind take it. When I asked her later if she regretted losing it, she smiled softly. The letter did not change in 20 years, but I did. I finally realized I was not the same person who had been wounded. Why should I carry her pain when I had already become someone new? That is the gift of forgiveness. It does not rewrite the letter, it rewrites you. But forgiveness is not always directed outward. Often the heaviest chains are the ones we forge for ourselves. The mistakes we made, the words we wish we hadn't spoken, the paths we wish we had taken differently. We hold ourselves prisoner, judge, and jury of a trial that never ends. What if you dared to forgive yourself? Imagine standing in a room lined with mirrors. In each reflection, you see a different version of yourself. The child you once were, the friend you betrayed, the lover. You lost the parent. You failed the dreamer. You silenced. And they all stare back at you with accusation. But forgiveness in that room would look like stepping toward each reflection and saying, I see you. I know you did not know better, and I release you. One by one, the reflections soften, dissolve, until only one remains, the you that stands here breathing alive, capable of beginning again. Forgiveness, then, is the art of renewal. A Japanese art form known as kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, it highlights them, making the vessel more beautiful than before. This is forgiveness, not hiding the break, but dignifying it, allowing the fracture to become part of the story, without being the end of it. When you forgive, you do not pretend the cup was never broken. You show the crack filled with gold as proof that broken things can be healed, and that what is healed can shine. But there is resistance. Always resistance. The mind whispers, if I forgive, I will be hurt again. If I let go, I will lose power. If I soften, I will be weak. Yet what is the reality? Clutching shards does not make you powerful. It makes you bleed. Carrying letters of betrayal does not make you strong. It makes you weary. Refusing to forgive does not protect you. It only anchors you to a past that no longer exists. Strength is not in the grip, but in the release. True strength is the ability to look at pain and say, you no longer define me. There is a river inside every human being. Forgiveness is not damming the river nor draining it dry. Forgiveness is opening the floodgate, letting the water flow again. When you hold resentment, the water stagnates, turns bitter, grows heavy with rot. But when you forgive, the current returns. Freshness, movement, life. And isn't life meant to flow? Isn't the heart meant to move forward, not circle endlessly around the same pool? Renewal begins quietly. A crack of light in a long closed room. A single flower pushing through cracked pavement. A first breath after years of suffocation. Renewal is not about becoming who you once were. It is about becoming who you are meant to be now. So ask yourself, what graffiti covers your walls? What letters still fold heavy in your pocket? What shards do you still clutch in your hand? Can you paint anew? Can you let the wind take the paper? Can you let the gold mend the break? Forgiveness is not for the other. It is for you. And renewal waits on the other side. There comes a moment when silence itself feels like a liberation, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence after a storm has passed, the kind where the air is fresh, the sky is clear, and even the earth seems to breathe again. This silence is what arrives when we begin to live without dragging yesterday into today. Presence is not simply being alive, it is being unburdened enough to notice, to taste the sweetness of water without comparing it to past droughts, to hear the laughter of a child without fearing the echo of past cries, to feel the warmth of sunlight without dragging in the memory of yesterday's shadows. Imagine standing in a field at dawn, dew clinging to blades of grass, every drop reflecting the rising sun. If you are carrying yesterday's weight, you will walk through that field with your head down, eyes closed, missing the miracle under your feet. But if you stand still, if you breathe, You will notice that each drop of dew is a universe, each breath a gift. Presence is this, the ability to let the dew remain. Dew, not memory, not regret, not fear. Living in presence feels like walking barefoot across smooth stone warm from the sun. Each step is enough, each sensation complete in itself. You do not need to grasp, you do not need to hurry. You are where you are meant to be. But we resist presence because it asks us to stop running. Many of us fear stillness more than struggle. We have been taught to survive by motion, by collecting, by clinging. And yet survival is not the same as living. To live, one must sometimes stand still. Consider the sky. It does not try to hold the clouds. It does not cling to them when they pass. A storm can rage, lightning can carve its marks across the heavens, and still the sky remains untouched, vast open. Presence is living as the sky, allowing experiences to drift through without claiming them as permanent. The opposite of presence is attachment. Attachment is like trying to bottle the wind, trying to capture fragrance in your hand. It only leaves you with emptiness. But when you open your hand, the wind continues to dance. The fragrance lingers in memory, and you realize you never needed to own it, to be touched by it. There is a story told of a monk who carried a bowl of clear water up a mountain path. With each step, the water trembled waves forming at the surface. When he finally reached the summit, the bowl was nearly empty, most of it spilled along the way. His teacher smiled and said, "You tried to reach the top while protecting the water. But what use is a bowl carried to the summit if it is empty? Better to drink along the way." Presence is drinking along the way. It is recognizing that life is not stored. It is experienced. If you wait until you arrive to live, you will find your bowl empty. And here lies freedom. The freedom not from responsibility, not from truth, but from the endless dragging of what has already ended. Freedom to breathe without armor, to smile without suspicion, to rest without guilt. When you live in presence, time no longer feels like a cage. Each moment is alive. Each heartbeat a door opening. Presence is not absence of memory. It is right relationship with memory. It is walking into a garden and seeing roses without overlaying them with the memory of thorns that once cut you. It is hearing a melody without drowning in the song that once brought tears. It is touching water without fearing the floods of the past. Presence is not erasing what has been. It is stepping fully into what is. The freedom of presence feels like the lifting of a veil. Suddenly, colors are sharper, sounds are clearer, the texture of existence richer. You do not need extraordinary events to feel alive. Ordinary life becomes extraordinary when seen without the dust of clinging. So pause now. Notice the way the air feels on your skin. Notice the rhythm of your own breath. Notice how the world moves quietly around you, independent of your fears and memories. This moment is not waiting to become something else. It is whole. It is enough. And so are you. Strength is often mistaken for the ability to hold, to dominate, to force. But the deepest strength is rarely loud. It does not clench its fists or harden its jaw. The truest strength is quiet, patient, and rooted in surrender. Think of a tree in the midst of a storm. The branches bend wildly, some even snap, but the roots hidden unseen hold steady. What allows the tree to survive is not rigidity, but flexibility. If the branches refused to bend, the entire trunk would break. Strength is not in resisting the wind, but in yielding enough to survive it. We have been taught that surrender means defeat, that if we yield, we have lost. But look at water. It does not fight rock with violence. It flows persistent and soft, carving canyons with time. Its strength is not in defiance, but in patience. The rock resists and crumbles. The water yields and endures. Resilience is not the absence of struggle. It is the art of yielding without breaking. There was once a bridge built of iron and stone, admired for its grandeur. When the floods came, the bridge stood firm at first, but as the water rose higher, debris slammed against its pillars until cracks spread and the mighty structure collapsed. Nearby, a humble wooden footbridge survived. Why? Because it swayed with the current. It let go of the illusion of control, allowing the water to pass through. Power without surrender breaks. Humility with flexibility survives. Surrender is not giving up. It is choosing not to be destroyed by what you cannot control. When illness comes, surrender is the courage to accept your limits while still cherishing the breath you have. When loss comes, surrender is the grace to mourn while still allowing life to move. When change arrives, surrender is the wisdom to let go of the shore and trust the current to carry you somewhere new. We often think resilience is built by tightening, by becoming harder, but hardness is brittle. What endures is supple. Bamboo survives the storm not because it is unbreakable, but because it sways, it bows, and then it rises again. So too must the human heart learn this art. To bow when necessary, to bend when life demands, to yield not in defeat, but in faith that rising will follow. There is strength in stillness too. Consider the mountain. It does not rush to prove itself, does not move to escape weather. Snow may fall, fire may scorch its slopes, yet the mountain remains, not stubbornly, not arrogantly, but with the calm endurance of being rooted in what is. That is surrender as well, the surrender to one's own essence, refusing to be defined by temporary seasons. Inner strength grows quietly like roots spreading beneath soil. No one sees them, but without them, no tree survives. The world often values the visible, the show of power, the loud declaration. But real resilience is invisible. It is in the breath taken after weeping. It is in the step taken after failure. It is in the heart that chooses to open again after being broken. You may wonder, how do I cultivate such strength? It begins with trust. Trust that life, however unpredictable, is not against you, but shaping you. Trust that surrender does not erase dignity, but deepens it. Trust that even when branches break, roots can grow deeper, anchoring you more firmly in the soil of being. Ask yourself, have you confused resistance with strength? Have you been the iron bridge refusing to yield only to find yourself breaking under the weight? Can you become like bamboo instead, flexible, humble, yet unshakably alive? Strength is not how tightly you hold on. Strength is how gracefully you release. After surrender, something remarkable begins to happen. Where once there was only exhaustion, space opens. Where once there was only silence, a faint song begins to rise. Renewal often comes quietly disguised as something ordinary, unnoticed, until it grows too radiant to ignore. Imagine a field in the dead of winter. The ground is frozen, the trees bear the sky heavy with clouds. To the eye it looks lifeless, yet beneath the soil seeds are waiting. They do not panic, they do not despair. They wait in darkness, patient, trusting the rhythm of seasons. And when spring arrives, the ground softens, light pierces the frost, and what seemed dead bursts into green. Renewal is like this. It does not rush. It does not arrive when commanded. It blooms when the time is ready. Think of the phoenix not as myth, but as metaphor. From ashes, something new arises, not the same creature reborn, but something transformed by fire. Renewal is not a return to who you once were. It is the birth of who you could only become after the burning. So too, with us, loss, grief, surrender. They burn away illusions, identities, attachments. From that ash, something purer can emerge. A friend once told me how she rebuilt her life after losing everything in a fire. She stood among ruins, walls blackened, memories turned to smoke. At first, she thought nothing could be restored. But as months passed, she began gathering fragments of broken tiles, pieces of porcelain, shards of glass. She set them into cement, forming a mosaic on her new home's walls. She said, "The fire took much from me, but it also gave me colors I never would have chosen. Now they shine together as something new. That is renewal, not denial of the loss, but creation from the fragments." There is a moment during an eclipse when the world feels swallowed by shadow. The sun disappears, the air cools, birds grow silent. For a breathless span, it seems as if light may never return. But slowly, inevitably, the sun emerges again, brilliant, undeniable. Renewal is like the return of light after eclipse. The darkness is real but temporary. The sun was never destroyed. It only stepped aside to remind us of its gift. Renewal often begins where endings feel absolute. A garden overrun by weeds can be cleared. A book closed too soon can be reopened. A heart shattered by loss can discover tenderness again, not in spite of its breaking, but because of it. Life is not a straight line, but a cycle. Every winter carries spring in its marrow. Every ending folds into a beginning. But renewal requires willingness. You cannot cling to the barren field and demand it stay fertile. You cannot clutch ashes and expect them to bloom. Renewal asks, can you trust the unseen? Can you believe in seeds hidden in darkness? Can you wait for a sun you cannot yet see? This is the faith that turns despair into growth. Renewal is not dramatic. It does not thunder. It is the small green shoot breaking through soil, the shy smile after grief, the fragile laugh that returns to a mouth long silent. These quiet miracles matter. They are the evidence that life is never finished with us, even when we feel finished with life. So pause and reflect. What ashes do you hold? What fragments could become a mosaic? What frozen ground within you waits for its season of thaw? Renewal is not far away. It is already beginning in places you cannot yet see. Hope is not a fragile wish whispered into the dark. It is a horizon. You may not reach it today. You may not touch it tomorrow, but it calls you forward. Even when the path is steep, even when the night is long, hope is the faint line of light, reminding you that morning waits. Possibility is born when hope takes root. Without hope, the ground is barren. With it, even the most desolate soil becomes fertile. Hope is not blind optimism. It is vision, the ability to see beyond what is here and now. Picture standing at the edge of the sea, the horizon stretching endlessly. You cannot see what lies beyond, yet you know there is land somewhere further, a place waiting though invisible. Hope is that unseen land. Possibility is the vessel you build to reach it. We live small when we lose sight of horizons. We walk in circles convinced the world ends where our eyes can no longer see. But once hope stirs, once possibility opens, the circle breaks into a path, the path stretches into a journey, and the journey unfolds into something greater than we ever imagined. A young man once told me he felt trapped in the town where he was born. convinced his life would always remain the same. One evening, he climbed a hill outside the village, and for the first time, he saw the vast sweep of mountains and rivers beyond. Nothing had changed in the world, yet everything changed in him. He realized his horizon was larger than his fear. That vision gave him courage to leave to begin anew. Hope does not always change the world instantly, but it always changes the eyes that look upon it. And changed eyes see new paths. Possibility is not the guarantee of success. It is the widening of perspective. A locked room feels like the end until you notice a window. The walls may still stand, but the sight of a window transforms despair into choice. Life is full of such windows. Sometimes they are small, an unexpected kindness, a door slightly ajar, a word that sparks courage. Sometimes they are vast, a calling that shakes your entire being. Hope is the lens that allows you to see them. Think of bridges. They are not the land on either side. They are the connection. Possibility is like a bridge of light stretching between who you are now and who you might yet become. You cannot live on the bridge, but you can cross it. And each step across opens new ground. Many people fear to step onto that bridge because the old land feels familiar, even if it is barren. But nothing grows in soil that has already given all it has. To step onto the bridge is to trust that the other side, though unseen, holds more than what you leave behind. Hope also teaches patience. The stars are invisible during the day, but they have not vanished. They are hidden, waiting for their time. So too, with possibility, it may not reveal itself when you demand it, but it waits until you are ready to see. What matters is not clinging to the past or grasping at the future, but keeping your heart open enough that when possibility appears, you are willing to step toward it. Hope is not naive. It does not deny difficulty. It simply insists that difficulty is not the end. Think of sailors navigating by the North Star. The seas may be violent, storms may rage, but as long as the star is visible, they know which way to turn. Hope is that star. It does not calm the waters, but it gives direction through them. Possibility, then, is the courage to sail even when the waves rise. So ask yourself, what horizon are you walking toward? What bridge calls you forward? What windows are hidden in your walls? Hope whispers, there is more than this. Possibility answers, take a step and you will see it. Becoming is not comfortable. It asks you to release the shape you once knew, the identity that once defined you, and step into something unformed, unfamiliar. To become is to walk into the wilderness of yourself, guided not by certainty, but by trust. Imagine a river that has carved its way for centuries, flowing steadily through valleys, feeding fields, shaping the land. One day, an earthquake shifts the earth, and the river is forced to find a new path. At first, it thrashes against the rocks, turbulent, unwilling to leave its familiar bed. But slowly, it learns to carve a new course. And in time, it creates another valley, another landscape, another life-giving stream. So it is with us. We resist when life shifts our course. We mourn the old riverbed, forgetting that the water is not bound to the path, it is the path. Becoming means trusting that even when the ground breaks beneath you, you still have the power to flow. The sculptor knows this truth as well. A lump of clay does not resist the wheel. It yields, it spins, it is pressed and reshaped by the artist's hands. To the clay, the pressure may feel like destruction, but to the sculptor, it is creation. What once was formless becomes a vessel. What once was mere earth becomes art. We too are clay. Life spins us, presses us, sometimes breaks us. But within those pressures lies the possibility of new form. The courage of becoming is allowing the wheel to turn, trusting that the shaping has purpose even when it feels like breaking. The stars tell the same story. Look at the night sky constellations that have guided humanity for millennia. Yet over time, the stars shift, the patterns change, new constellations emerge. The stories we once told about them are rewritten, new myths replacing old. But the stars do not vanish. They simply rearrange. Identity is like this. Who you were at 15 is not who you are at 30. The stars of your being remain, but the way they connect, the meaning they form, changes. Becoming is the courage to redraw your constellation, to tell a new story with the same stars. But becoming requires shedding skins. Like a snake leaving behind what no longer fits you, must let the past self fall away. Not because it was wrong, but because it has served its time. The courage lies in not clinging to a skin that has grown too tight. Many of us cling because we fear emptiness. We think, if I let go of who I was, what will remain? But the truth is, in that in-between space between the old skin and the new, you discover freedom. You discover that identity is not a cage, but a canvas. To become is also to endure uncertainty. Like a traveler standing on a bridge in fog, you cannot see the other side. Yet you walk anyway, trusting each step. The courage of becoming is not about seeing the whole path. It is about taking the next step and then the next until the fog lifts and a new landscape unfolds. Becoming means refusing to be defined by endings. A door closes, yes, but perhaps not to trap you. Perhaps it closes to turn you toward another that has been waiting unseen. Courage is not lamenting the door behind you, but daring to knock on the door ahead. There was once a woman who lost the career she had built for decades. At first, she felt erased, as if her identity had been burned away. But slowly, she began painting. Each canvas carried pieces of her grief, her longing, her hope. Over time, she realized she had not been erased. She had been redirected. She had not lost herself. She had uncovered another self waiting beneath. That is becoming, not a betrayal of who you were, but the unfolding of who you were always meant to be. So ask yourself, what riverbed have you outgrown? What clay is waiting to be shaped? What constellation in your night sky is asking to be redrawn? The courage of becoming is to say yes to these questions, to let the river flow, to yield to the wheel, to trace new stars in the darkness. And when you do, you will find that becoming is not about losing, it is about expanding. It is about stepping into the vastness of yourself and realizing you were never finished, only unfolding. To give is to expand. Every act of true generosity stretches the heart wider, carving out new space where fear and scarcity once lived. We often think of giving as loss, as subtraction. But the mystery of life is that genuine giving multiplies rather than diminishes. Imagine standing in a darkened field, holding a single lantern. Alone, its light covers only a small circle. But when you pass that flame to another lantern, your light does not grow weaker, it doubles. As more and more lanterns are lit, the darkness recedes, not because one person held on tightly, but because one person dared to share. Generosity is not depletion, it is ignition. Think of a well dug deep into the earth. If one family keeps it locked, the water stagnates, turning brackish. But if the well is open, the water remains fresh, flowing as it is drawn. Giving works in the same way. When we withhold, what we clutch spoils. When we share, what we give renews itself. The paradox of generosity is that in releasing, you are replenished. There was once a farmer who planted an orchard. For years he harvested fruit and sold it, keeping the best for himself, discarding what remained. But over time, the soil weakened. The trees grew sick. The fruit lost its sweetness. One day, he began leaving part of the harvest for birds, part for his neighbors, part for the soil itself in compost. Slowly, the orchard revived. The branches grew heavy again, the fruit rich and abundant. Life thrives when it circulates. Giving is the circulation of the soul. But generosity is not only material. It is presence. It is listening. It is the patience to sit beside someone in silence when words cannot reach them. It is the choice to bless with kindness when judgment would be easier. It is the decision to encourage when envy whispers otherwise. Such giving costs nothing but transforms everything. The art of giving also asks us to release control. Many hesitate to give because they fear what will be done with their offering. But once a gift leaves your hand, it is no longer yours to govern. Its journey may surprise you. Its impact may ripple further than you could ever measure. A word spoken today might heal a wound you never see. A gesture of kindness may return to you years later in a form you do not recognize. To give is to trust the unseen economy of the heart. Think of a fire. One log burns brightly, but will eventually collapse into ash. Add another log, share the flame, and the fire strengthens. A single spark can ignite countless others without ever losing its own heat. This is the law of generosity in kindling. Another your flame does not dim, it burns stronger. Yet to give is also to risk. To give is to admit that you have more than enough even when fear insists you do not. To give is to declare that your abundance is not measured by what you keep, but by what you release. It takes courage to be generous in a world that preaches scarcity. But every act of giving is an act of defiance against fear. So ask yourself, what lantern could you pass? What well within you could you open? What orchard waits to bear fruit, if only you share its harvest? The art of giving is not a strategy. It is a way of being. It is to live as though life itself is generous and to discover that it is. Presence is not merely being alive. It is the art of truly arriving in this moment unarmed, unburdened, awake. Many live as shadows of themselves, pulled backward by memory, dragged forward by anxiety, while the present slips away unnoticed. But the present is the only place where life can actually be touched. Imagine a violin resting in the corner of a room. Untouched, it is wood and string, silent and ordinary. But when a bow draws across it, when attention awakens, its sound emerges rich, trembling, alive. The violin was always there, yet without presence, it remained mute. Life is the same. The world is filled with music waiting, but it only plays when you are here to listen. Presence is the open window on a summer night, letting in fresh air. Without it, the room grows stale, heavy with the past. With it, space clears, and the breeze reminds you that you are alive. When you live absent from the present, you close the window. You recycle old air, replay. Old thoughts suffocate on repetition. But when you open it even briefly, the entire atmosphere shifts. There are flowers that bloom only once a year, and some that open only for a single night. Miss that night, and the bloom is gone. Presence is recognizing the bloom while it unfolds. It is the awareness that every encounter, every laugh, every breath has its own season. If you are distracted, you miss the miracle. If you are present, you catch it in its full radiance. The power of presence is subtle but transformative. A conversation becomes sacred when you are fully listening, not rehearsing your reply. A meal becomes holy when you taste it without rushing, without checking your watch. Even suffering shifts when met with presence. Pain is no longer multiplied by resistance. It becomes sensation, sharp, raw, but real, and therefore bearable. There is a hidden well inside each of us. When the noise of memory and fear settles, when the dust of distraction clears, we can draw from it. This well is silence. It nourishes us not with words, not with promises, but with stillness. Presence is lowering the bucket into that well, drinking deeply of what has been waiting all along. Presence does not require special conditions. It is not found only in meditation halls or mountaintops. It is here in the steam rising from your morning cup, in the footsteps you hear along the street, in the way your chest rises and falls as you breathe. Each of these is an entryway. Presence asks only that you notice. Many resist presence because it strips away illusions. When you arrive fully here, you can no longer hide behind someday or yesterday. You face yourself as you are. But in that nakedness lies liberation. You discover that you do not need to become anything else to be whole. You were whole the moment you began noticing. Ask yourself now, what is before you that you are not seeing? What music waits to be played? What flower waits to be noticed? What window waits to be opened? Presence whispers, you do not need to chase life. You need only to arrive. Presence is the doorway, but connection is the dance that follows. To be present is to arrive in yourself. To connect is to extend that presence outward, to meet another soul in the space between. We often imagine connection as something built with words, gestures, promises. But deeper connection happens in silence, in the quiet recognition of shared humanity, in the invisible threads that tie one heart to another. Imagine a loom weaving strands of thread. One thread alone is fragile, easily snapped. But woven together, they form fabric strong enough to clothe, to shelter, to endure. Connection is the weaving. Each act of attention, each gesture of kindness, each honest word is a thread. Over time, the threads interlace, creating a fabric that holds us when life frays at the edges. Look up at the night sky. The stars scatter endlessly, each brilliant yet solitary. But when you draw lines between them, constellations emerge. Stories are born. Guidance is found. Meaning is created. Connection is like this. The stars of our lives remain isolated unless we dare to trace lines, to see patterns, to let our stories intertwine. There was once a musician who played in an empty hall, his notes echoing back only to himself. One evening, another musician wandered in and began to play alongside him. At first, their sounds clashed, unfamiliar, discordant. But slowly, they began to listen, to respond, to adjust. What was once noise became harmony. Connection does not demand perfection. It asks for listening, for willingness to shape yourself to another's rhythm. The dance of connection also requires vulnerability. To connect is to risk being misunderstood, rejected, or hurt. But without that risk, we remain islands. Picture a canyon with two voices calling across it. If one remains silent, the canyon stays empty. But if both speak, echoes carry building bridges of sound across the vastness. Vulnerability is the first call, the courage to let your voice rise into the open, unsure if it will be met. And when it is, the canyon becomes alive with resonance. Connection is not always symmetrical. Sometimes you give more than you receive. Sometimes you are carried when you cannot walk. But the dance balances over time. What matters is the willingness to keep stepping, to keep showing up, even when the rhythm falters. In truth, connection is less about finding another and more about recognizing yourself in them. When you hold a newborn, you do not marvel at their achievements. You marvel because their existence mirrors your own fragility, your own beginnings. When you sit with a dying friend, you do not connect through future plans. You connect because their fading reminds you of your own impermanence. Connection is the mirror that teaches, I am not alone. I am part of something larger. Ask yourself, what threads are you weaving? What stars are waiting to be joined? What voices call to you across your own canyon? The dance of connection is not a performance. It is the simple miracle of showing up, of saying, I see you, I hear you, I am with you. Every journey, no matter how far it wanders, carries within it the pull of return. We seek horizons, we chase transformation, we surrender and rebuild. But at the heart of it all is the quiet call to come home, not to the house of bricks and walls, but to the dwelling of the soul. Imagine the tide. It travels outward, stretching into open sea, yet always without fail, it returns to shore. This rhythm is not weakness. It is the truth of belonging. So too with us. We may scatter ourselves into ambition, heartbreak, adventure, despair, but some part of us always longs for the shore of stillness. The tide of our spirit always knows the way back. The circle has always been a symbol of return. Unlike a line that breaks into beginning and end, a circle completes itself. Seasons turn, the sun rises and falls, and in that turning we discover continuity. Our lives are not straight roads leading into oblivion, but circles returning us again and again to the essence we thought we had lost. Picture a hearth in the center of a home. No matter how far the wanderers travel, they carry in memory the glow of that fire. When they return, the hearth is there, not always blazing, sometimes reduced to embers, but alive enough to be rekindled. The path of return is like this. It does not erase the miles you have walked. It gathers them into warmth, into story, into belonging. The path of return is not regression. It is not slipping back into what was. It is carrying all you have learned, the brokenness and the healing, the grief and the hope, the absence and the presence, back into the center of your being. You do not return as who you were. You return as who you have become. There is a quiet joy in returning. It is not the fireworks of conquest, nor the noise of triumph. It is the sigh of rest after a long road. It is the soft knowing that you no longer need to run, because what you sought was never far, it was always within. The ancients spoke of pilgrimage, of leaving home to find the sacred, but every true pilgrimage ends not in discovering a shrine in some faraway land, but in discovering that the shrine was carried within all along. The path of return is the revelation that the home you sought is the silence inside the hearth of the heart, the circle of being. And so after all the metaphors, roots and rivers, bridges and stars, lanterns and tides, we are brought back to the simplest truth: to live is to wander, to suffer, to seek, but also to return. And in returning, we are not diminished, but made whole. Ask yourself, where is your tide pulling you? What circle are you completing? What hearth waits within you to be rekindled? The path of return whispers, you are not lost. You are simply on your way home. The journey has led us through surrender and renewal, through hope and becoming, through giving presence and connection. Each step has not been a separate road, but a circle spiraling inward, spiraling home. We began with burdens, with the heavy weight of memory and expectation. We learned to set them down, to allow the river to carve its own new path, to let the sculptor's hands reshape the clay of our being. We discovered that endings are not graves, but gardens, that ashes are not emptiness, but soil for seeds. Hope opened before us like distant horizons, lanterns lit one by one, bridges rising from the fog. Presence invited us into the holiness of this very moment, where even a single breath becomes prayer. Connection reminded us that our lives are not solitary stars scattered in silence, but constellations that shine only when joined together. And at last, we stood before the hearth of return, where we are no longer who we once were, nor who we thought we had to be, but who we truly are, whole alive here. This path has no final destination, only rhythm, outward into the world, inward to the soul, the tide and the shore, the wandering and the homecoming again and again. What remains is not a lesson to be memorized, but a truth to be lived. Surrender is strength, renewal is possible, hope is horizon, presence is power, connection is the dance, return is wholeness. So pause, breathe, feel the circle close and open once more. You are not late, you are not lost, you are exactly where you need to be on the path, carrying light held by the same rhythm that guides oceans and stars. When the night grows heavy, remember, there is always a horizon. When the road feels endless, remember that every step is also a return. And when silence surrounds you, let it whisper the truth that has been echoing through every metaphor, every story, every breath of this journey. You are already home.